each night this week, we're looking at something that you can't live without. No matter who you are, no matter what you believe, you have to have an identity, a solid identity. You have to have meaning in life. You have to have the kind of satisfaction that lasts through the ups and downs of changing circumstances. Each night we're looking at one of them and asking this question: in what way does Christianity give arguably unequaled resources to find that thing? We all are looking for these things. And even though I'm trying to be, especially tonight, respectful of all the various views, I'm here to make a case that Christianity gives unequaled resources for each of them. Now tonight, for those of you who've been here any other night, I cannot possibly approach this subject quite in the same way. The subject tonight is, how do you get the ability to face difficulty and suffering? Nassim Nicholas Taleb has written a book called Anti-Fragile, and in it he says, obviously we don't want to be fragile, that when tough things happen, we fall apart. But he said, it's not enough just to say, well, how do you just get through it without falling apart? He says, we don't want to be fragile, but we don't want to just be enduring. He says, what does it mean to be a person who gets stronger through the shocks? What kind of person do you have to be to actually grow through the suffering? And he didn't think there was a good word for that, so he called it anti-fragile. So he's written a book called Anti-Fragile, saying not just fragile, not just sort of, gritting your teeth till you get through it, but what do you have to do, what do you have to be in order to actually be anti-fragile, actually grow through it? We all need that, but I have to tell you, when I'm talking to people who have suffered, and have suffered worse than me, you've got to go at this sort of subject with a certain amount of fear and trembling and whatever humility you can muster. But I would like to show you what Christianity has to offer, and Simon's already made reference to it, but I like to take a look at what we've been doing each night. I would like to look at a text in the book of Mark. It raises the issue, we'll reflect on the issue, and then at the end I'll bring you back to the text to show you actually what the Christianity offers in order to give us the thing we're looking for, which is being anti-fragile, being someone who not just bear up under, but actually grow into something wiser and deeper and happier even through troubles and suffering. I'm going to read from Mark chapter 5. What I've been saying every night is if you want to follow along, there are Gospels of Mark out there, but you may just want to listen to me. And I'm going to be reading from Mark 5, verses 22 to 42, and I'm actually going to give you only excerpts. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came and pleaded earnestly with him, Jesus. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched him, his cloak. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Suffering comes in forms innumerable, and therefore suffering is inevitable. Suffering is inevitable. To some degree, it's coming. And suffering will make you worse or better. It will make you harder or more tender. It'll make you weaker or stronger, but it will not leave you as you were. It will radically transform you one way or another, and which way depends on your response, and it's on its way. The suffering is on its way if it hasn't already found you. So you see how incredibly crucial it is to ask the question, how do you handle it? In fact, how could you even perhaps grow through it? Before the secular modern culture came along, all other cultures and all other religions, to some degree, said your meaning in life, your life purpose, the thing you're living for, is nothing inside this material world. So the meaning of life for the monotheistic religions and cultures was, the meaning of life is to live and believe in such a way that you go to heaven and live with God and your loved ones forever. The meaning of life in karmic cultures is to live a life of such virtue that you eventually escape the cycles of reincarnation and you go into eternal bliss. The meaning of life in Buddhism is that you need to be overcoming the illusion of the material world and of an individual self, so you eventually go into the all-soul. In shame and honor cultures, the meaning of life is to live honorably, even bravely, so that you not only bring an honorable name to your family, but then you die and you rest with your ancestors. It's all about family. It's all about the name of your family. It's all about honor. Now, you see, in every case, what this means is, because your meaning in life, in whatever culture, was actually not something inside this material world. Suffering not only can't take your meaning in life away, but it actually, in some ways, can enhance it. But the secular viewpoint is completely different. What is the secular viewpoint? Well, the secular worldview says either there's no God or we can't know if there's a God. That everything has a natural cause. That there's no transcendent or supernatural dimension to reality, and there's certainly no afterlife. So in the secular worldview, what's your meaning in life? Whatever your meaning in life is, it's always got to be something inside this material world. It's got to be success, financially or politically. It's got to be romance. It's got to be love. It's got to be something inside. And of course, you know what that means. It means in the secular worldview, suffering, well, that's what suffering does. What suffering does is it takes away those things. That's what makes suffering suffering. It takes away love. It takes away success. It takes away health. It takes away those things. And if your meaning in life is in those things, it doesn't just take away material things, it destroys your very meaning in life. Read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, or less well-known, Langdon Gilkey, Shantung Compound. Langdon Gilkey was put in an internment camp in China during World War II by the Japanese. Viktor Frankl was actually in Auschwitz but survived, and he was a Jewish psychiatrist. And both of them talk about what happens to people who actually have their meaning in life be something in this world, and when it's all taken away from them, what happens to them? They either go evil or they shrivel up into a little ball and disintegrate. So he gets there, and he sits down alongside of her. He tells everybody she's asleep. They laugh at him. And he sits down, and he takes her by the hand, and he says in Aramaic, which, by the way, is a mark that this is an eyewitness account, not a legend. In Aramaic, it's an eyewitness memory. He says, Talitha cum. It gives you a literal translation. Literally, Talitha is a diminutive of the word girl, so it means little girl, get up. But what you don't know is that it's actually a diminutive word, but it was also an intimate word. It was a word of affection. It was a word that parents use with their children. A better translation would be sweetheart. Jesus sits down next to the dead girl, takes her by the hand, and says, sweetheart, it's time to get up. The way a mother would say it on a sunny morning. Sweetheart, it's time to get up. And then he lifts her up right through death. You say, oh, wait a minute, didn't he say she was just asleep? Yeah. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean she wasn't dead. Because, by the way, in the Gospel of Luke, it says her spirit returned to her. In the Gospel of Luke that gives you the same story, it explains very clearly she was dead. Well, then why would he say she was asleep? Here's what he's saying. Look at my power and look at my love. Death is the most implacable, inexorable foe that a human being has. And Jesus just reaches right through it, takes her by the hand, and pulls her right up. It's his way of saying, if I have you by the hand, even death is just a nice night's sleep. And Jesus is also saying, and Mark is trying to show us this too, death will not be the last word in your life.